What's up YouTube, and welcome to another draw along with me. Today is this snowman themed design where the canvas size is 2000 by 2000. There's a link in the description down below to both the palette and one brush that you're going to need for today's design. The rest are all built into Procreate. If you're watching this over the Christmas period, I wish you a Merry Christmas and also a Happy New Year. If you're new here, I post Procreate content every single week, so if you'd like some tutorials to follow along with, hit that subscribe button down below. And if you'd like to get even more tutorials, there's a link to my Patreon where I'll throw up the latest 3 tutorials on the screen now. We can get even more tutorials every single month, including sneak peeks, extra benefits on my Discord server and merch. And with all that said, let's get started. So once you've created your canvas, first thing we're going to want to do is go to our layers, and we're going to change the background color out to the correct one. So we're going to tap on background color. And you're going to want to select this color here on the left hand side of the palette. Now there is an error at the minute with Procreate where the colors are moving around. You're going to want to select this color here. So take a look at my 2 areas where my color selection are there. That's the one you're going to want to use, and hit done. Then on this empty layer, we're going to go ahead and start with our main character, which is going to be our snowman. So we're going to draw that in first, so we've got the main center point. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to our colors. And if you're not already, double tap at the top left hand corner to select white. And for this entire design, we're going to use some charcoal brushes. So we're going to go to our brush library, and under charcoals, we are going to use the KB compressed brush for this. Now what we're going to want to do, my brush size is set to about 7%. All we want to do, let's actually increase that. Let's go to about 12, and we're just going to draw a circle in the middle of the screen. Hold your pen at the end, and then pop your finger on the screen to get a nice perfect circle. And you want to create the first snowball for your snowman. So something roughly around about that sort of size is good. You're going to want to drag and drop the color into the space, and you may get a little bit of fraying around the edge. Well, we're just going to go in there manually and just circular motion, just sort of fill it out, because we want to leave the edges a little bit softer. So something like that looks pretty good where we've got these nice soft edges. Next we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to our layers. I'm going to swipe on that layer to the left and duplicate it. We're then going to grab our cursor and we're going to move that up. So perfectly up, you'll get those blue lines. And then we're going to use the uniform option. We're going to scale that down just a little bit and then pop our extra snowball on top of our snowman figure. And then tap on your cursor when you're done. And then we're going to go to our layers again. We're going to swipe on that layer to the left and duplicate it one more time. We're going to grab our cursor. I'm going to scale it down and then move it up for the head of our snowman. So something like that looks pretty good in terms of scale, maybe a smidge smaller, and then making sure we get that blue line running down the middle, which lets you know you're running straight down the middle of the other ones underneath, and you can do that by turning on snapping down here. We're then going to go to our cursor and stop that. We're then going to go to our layers and we're going to swipe on all 3, so we're going to select all of them by swiping from left to right on each one till all 3 of them are selected. We're going to grab our cursor, and then we're just going to position that nice and central in the middle of our design. So something like that, maybe even scale that down and move it slightly further down because we've got to put a hat on yet. So tap on your cursor when you're done. Next, let's draw in the little hat on the top here. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to tap on the top snowball and create a new layer. We're going to go to our colors, and the first thing we're going to want to do is select this base red here, the middle red of this selection of red. So that is the 6th column along and the 2nd color down. And then using the same brush, let's reduce it back down to about 7% for accuracy. We're going to create 2 different shapes. We're going to create the top half of the hat, and then we're going to create this sort of drooping down bit on the back there. So what you're going to want to do is just create a sort of rough line across the head, and then just create a curve back like so, and you don't need to worry about filling it in just yet, and then just a curve here as well, sort of leading up into this point, because then we're going to have the back of the hat trail off down there. And then again, let's just fill that in with this lovely charcoal brush like so, trying to fill in the center more than anything. And we're doing red first so that we can then draw the band on afterwards. So that's looking pretty good. Potentially you could grab your cursor if you wanted to and just move that slightly higher up, and also make sure you hit that orange line which is straight down the middle of your canvas, and then you can tap on your cursor. We're then going to go ahead and let's just switch our color out to something different, maybe slightly off-white, so some sort of gray here in the top left. It's only temporary for now. We're then going to go back to our layers. We're going to create a new layer, and we're going to create the band that's going to go across the front here of the hat. So So we're just going to start on one end and go backwards and forwards until you sort of match the width of the hat, and you want to create as thick a band as you like for your snowman's hat and sort of rounding it off at the sides here. So I'm just rounding it off on either side till we get a nice big fluffy band, and this charcoal brush will actually help with that sort of effect. And just make sure you fill in the center nicely. And then we're going to go to our layers. We're going to create the back of the hat, so we're going to create a new layer and drag it underneath the red part that we just created. Switch your color back to the red that we previously used. And then from there, we're going to create sort of another sort of drooping bit on the back here. So down to a point and just bring that up and then fold that around the back of the head and blend that in. So we're on a separate layer, and that's on purpose so that we can add some texture, but as long as your lines smoothly sort of run all the way down, you'll be perfect. Then one more layer we've got to make. Let's create a new one just above what we just used. And then let's switch our color out back to white by double tapping in the top left of the palette. And we're going to draw in a little circle just on the end, a little fluffy ball on the end of the hat. Then backwards and forwards, and you'll get that lovely soft look around the outside. And then that is the basis of our snowman. So we're going to go ahead and shade all of this in first, then we're going to add all the finer details like the eyes, the nose, etc. And then we'll work on the background scene as well. So taking a look at our layers, let's go down to the bottom circle, and we're going to alpha lock that layer by tapping on it and using the option of alpha lock. So that means now you can only paint within the boundaries of this circle here. So if we go up to our colors, we're going to use a couple of different shades for this, but we've got a couple of sort of purpley tones for the shading rather than black. So we've got this top color here in the top of the fourth column, and that's going to be sort of our light shadow. So something we can work with and then build on top of. And with our brush still selected at the same, maybe make it a bit bigger. Let's go for something about 10%. We need to bear in mind that the lighting's coming from the left hand side and coming across the scene, and we also have a snowball sat on top of this one. So we're going to primarily focus here, our shading, a little bit here, and then also underneath this snowball there. So that's kind of where we're going to end up aiming for. So let's try and emphasize the fact that this one's sat on top. So roughly where we sort of know where this curvature goes, in a circular motion, very, very lightly towards this right hand side, we are just going to sort of highlight where that shadow would sit. And then you can start to sort of push it outwards from the shadow that you just created, meaning that we add it here because we know that's right where the snowball is, and then we can start to push that shadow outwards towards the bottom. We're then going to start to curve our shadow down here as well, creating that spherical look. So just going backwards and forwards. And don't worry if you go all the way to the edge, because in a minute we'll come back to this and add in some sort of reverb highlight. So then we're just going to just curve that round. And then likewise towards the bottom, there'll be a bit of darkness because of obviously where the light is and it touching the ground. So we're just going to darken up down here as well. Just curving that around the bottom. And then up the side here as well. Going back and forwards on ourselves. And it's going to start to really build up that sort of fluffy look. We are then going to just bring that slightly around the back here of this snowball. So just a little bit around this left hand side. We're just trying to build up that spherical look. And again, we can go back over ourselves with highlights afterwards. So just bringing it right round, and a little bit more potentially just on this bit here, just underneath that snowball. And then we should end up with something looking like that in terms of our shading. Now if you want to, you could just sort of very lightly just gloss over the white area here just to get some more texture, but just like there, you don't want to press too hard. So just very lightly, just brush over here, creating some nice sort of fluffy texture on our snowball, bringing that round at the bottom. So that's that first layer done. Let's switch our color out to then a slightly darker tone, which will be the second color in the fourth column. And then we're going to darken up the areas we need. So slightly underneath this snowball here and more towards this right hand edge. We can leave the rest of it. We don't need to go over everything, but just a little bit under here, just to show the sort of layers stacked on top of each other. And then let's just darken up a little bit more in this real dark area on this right hand side. So sort of curve that round and just layer on top of the other charcoal, and potentially just around the bottom edge, again where it's sort of sitting on the ground, is where we'll darken up a bit more. And then bring that around on the right. These charcoal brushes are so fun to use because you can really build up the colour and you get a lovely little bit of texture in there. Next we're going to switch our colour out and we're going to use some of these lighter tones on the left hand side, primarily this one in the top left hand corner, which is a light blue. So we're going to tap on that one, first colour in the palette, top left, and then in our highlighted area we're going to brush over that lightly, very lightly, just to add in some blue tones, and push that into your shadows a little bit more as well. And then press a bit firmer if you want to, just build up that blue. And then likewise, let's just add a little bit of blue right around this right hand edge, right around the right hand side. So we do the shadows on purpose first, so that then we can just add a little bit of highlight on top of them to create that spherical look. And we've got a lovely little bit of shaded blue in there. Now if we want to, we can actually switch it out then to this blue down here. So first column, very bottom colour, and then we're just going to emphasize that blue even more by just punching in some of that colour on that left hand side. And I'm doing this just to avoid using white primarily, just to add in some extra tones in there. And you can sort of soften up this left hand side a little bit more with some lovely colours there. Next we're going to switch it out to then this yellow. Now this is the one you need to work with and be very gentle with. So the second colour on the top row of our palette, you may want to reduce your opacity down to say 50%, and because we're just going to very lightly just add a slight yellow hue to this left hand side here, and I mean very, very lightly. We don't want it to look like yellow snow, so we just want it to just have a little bit of lighting on there, just to show where the sunlight, which will be coming from this left hand side, is coming from. Now that's looking awesome. I'm pretty happy with that as it is. We're then going to go ahead now and work on the one above. This snowball that we just worked on is exactly the same. It's got a snowball above it. Now at this point what we could do is, if we go up to our layers, the one that we were just working on, let's swipe it to the left and duplicate it so we save ourselves some time. Drag it above the snowball above, and then grab your cursor. We want to scale it down a little bit, and we want to position it exactly the same position as where the other one is. So just push that up, make sure that your shadows all match up, so you need to really match up the snowball as best you can and scale it up until it fits the original position. Now you could actually leave it there, and just to be triple sure that it fits, we're going to go to our layers, and you could tap on the layer we just used and clipping mask it to the shape of the original snowball that you positioned. That way it clips itself nicely to that original shape. And I'm just going to move mine slightly up and slightly bigger just to match up the shadows. And tap on your cursor when you're done. And that's two of our snowballs nicely done now. We can then move on to the head. So for this one, we're going to do this one on its own. So to save some layers, we're actually going to go ahead and the one that we just clipped to the snowball, we're going to pinch those two together. We don't need them to be separate any longer. Now the top snowball, we're going to tap on that. We're going to alpha lock it. We're going to go up to our colours, and we're going to start with our light shadow colour here. And just shadow in this right hand side, right around the bottom here. Shadow in that right hand side, going all the way to the edge as well. Getting lighter as you get towards the centre. A little bit of darkness towards the bottom. We also need to add a nice little shadow underneath the hat, and especially over here on the right hand side. You can see I've got a little bit here on the left, but then start to really sort of drag that down into like a triangle sort of tailing off point on the right hand side there. Let's darken up this edge here. And then let's go around the very left hand side as well, just adding in a lovely little soft shadow there. And again, very lightly, just brush over in the center here. It may drop a little bit of texture on there for you. Let's switch it out to the other shadow color then, so the second shadow color on the fourth column. And then we're going to just darken up certain areas. So slightly under the hat here, we want to just darken up under there. Definitely over here on the right hand side where that hat sits. And then start to push that shadow down and around that right hand edge, like so. Just pushing it towards that right hand side there, and around the bottom a little bit too. But just darkening up that shadow. We'll leave the left hand side, we don't need to worry about that. And then we've got a nice dark shadowed area there. We can then go ahead and switch out to our sort of highlight colours. So let's pick the first colour in the palette. Brush over this little space here, adding in some lovely blue tones pushing that out towards that left hand side, overlapping our shadow that we just added. And you can soften up your shadow as well. I'm then going to just add a little bit around this right hand edge and slightly underneath as well, just to separate it from the other shadow space. So you can see I'm working right outside the lines and just bringing that sort of rounded highlight in on that right hand side there. Let's switch it out to the blue, so the bottom of the first column. And again, let's just brush over this left hand side, adding in a little bit more blue. Just give it those real cold feel vibes and tones. Then let's switch it out to yellow, the first colour on the second column, and then brush over that left hand side with a little bit of yellow, just a little bit, very lightly. Now the whole time for this top circle I've been at 50%, we can now increase that back up to 100. And then if we zoom out, we've got our snowman already coming to life. Let's then work on the band and the hat. So let's go to our layers. We're going to work at the top first, so the band. Now it's the wrong colour to start with, so we're going to go ahead and tap on that layer. We're going to alpha lock it. We're going to go up to our colours. We're going to double tap in the top left hand corner to select white, and then we're going to brush over the entire thing. And now, because we've already added our shadows in, we can nicely sort of identify it against the other white objects. So we only did that as a sort of temporary measure. We're going to switch our colour out to the first shading colour, so the fourth column along the top colour. And we're going to very lightly brush over the entire thing, but then primarily focus on this right hand side and then move that across. Now we do want this to be very light because we want it to primarily be white, but just add in like a nice little bit of fluff. And likewise on the very left hand side here, a tiny bit as it wraps around the head. And I'm actually pretty happy with that tone. We don't need to go to the very dark tone. We're going to switch it out though to the blue in the top left hand corner, the very pale blue, and then just lighten up this right hand side with a little sort of rounding highlight, and then potentially you can add in a little bit more colour on that band, just like so. But that looks pretty good to me. We're then going to go ahead and work on the next layer down, which is the red hat. So I'm going to turn that layer on and off just to be sure. We're going to tap on that layer and alpha lock it. We're going to go up to our colours and our red tones. We've got 3 of them, and we're going to use one for highlight and one for shadow. So we're going to start with shadow, the bottom colour. We're then going to go ahead, and this shape here, if I just very quickly fill it in, should go along this line here. So we just need to bear in mind that this bit of the hat, we're just going to darken up under here, bring that hat around, and you can see I've kind of created this sort of pointed sort of shape here, like a triangle, just darkening up there, and I'll darken up the very left hand edge as well, but just bringing in those shadows and moving them up and across every time I do so, like that. And then next we're going to go to our colours and switch it out to the light colour at the top of the column of reds, and then we're going to go ahead and on this left hand side just paint in some lovely brighter tones and fade them into our shadows, like so. And then ever so slightly down here on the right hand side, just add in a slightly rounding highlight, like so, just a little bit, until you get that sort of look. We're then going to go back to our layers. The next one down is the little ball on the end of the hat. We're going to tap on that layer and we're going to alpha lock it. We're going to switch it out to our shadow colour, the top of the fourth column. And then we're going to simply just darken up the bottom right hand edge. And that is quite literally everything you need to do. Just a little bit of texture on there and keep it nice and white and bright. The next layer is the tiny little bit of the hat that flops over the back. So I'm going to tap on that layer. We're going to alpha lock that one as well. We're going to go to our colours. And we're going to use our shadow colour at the bottom of the red column. Darken up that right hand edge, like so. And I'm not going to go into here. I want these 2 bits here to not really be touched. So the top left hand side of the bit that we're working on and the top right hand side of the original shape, so that the colours just simply blend into one another and the hat is pretty seamless to one another. We're going to work under here as well, just darkening up that sort of shadow where it sort of rolls around on the back. And we're not going to add any highlight to this one, we're just going to leave that as it is, just like that. So now we've got our snowman. Let's go ahead and add in some eyes and some buttons throughout the whole design, and the nose as well. So on our layers, we've got the head layer here. Let's create a new layer right above it. Let's go to our colours. We're going to select this colour here at the bottom of the sort of shadow colours, so the 3rd colour down on the 4th column. I'm going to reduce my brush size to about 7 or maybe even 5%. Let's go 5%. And we want to create some circles, so we're just going to sort of draw in sort of an ellipse even, just slightly more horizontal than it is sort of rounded. Something like that is good. And now just for a moment, we're going to duplicate the layer a few different times, just so we've got some positioning and some freedom with our movement. So we're going to swipe on this one to the left and duplicate it. We're going to grab our cursor, and then we're just going to move this one across, maybe even scale it down slightly so it's slightly smaller on that left hand side of the head there. And then tap on your cursor when you're done. And that's kind of the sort of pointing and the direction that we want our snowman to be facing. I'm going to move my right hand eye across just a smidge till it hits there. And then if you're happy with your expression there, you can go ahead and pinch those two together. And then you can also tap on that layer and alpha lock it. We're then going to grab our colors, and we're going to grab the one in the top left hand corner of our palette. And we're just going to add in the tiniest little highlight on these, just to give them a rounded look. So we're going to reduce the brush size down to about 2%. And on the left hand side here, just add in the tiniest little bit of color. Just a very tiny bit of color. And a sort of bright point as well. That will just help give it some more texture. Now what we can go ahead and do, just for the body down here, we're going to go to our selection tool and select whichever one you want out of the two that you like the look of. I'm going to grab the smaller one by drawing a loop all the way around. Now you need the freehand option here. And then just tap on this option down here for copy and paste. Now that will paste in another new layer with just that selected. And if you've got uniform selected, you can just drag that down. And then you've got your first one on the chest there. Let's go to our layer, swipe it to the left and duplicate it. Grab your cursor again, and then just drag it down again. And then go to your layer one more time and swipe that to the left and duplicate it. Grab your cursor and just move that slightly further down as well, till you create this sort of, it's not a straight line, it's slightly curved line of the sort of rocks that are going to be used there, little stones or pebbles. Now we're going to just add in the nose, and then so for that we're going to go up to our layers. We're going to go ahead and pinch the 3 of those that we were just working with onto one layer. And if you want to, you could actually pinch all of them together if you're happy with the expression on the face so far. So we're going to pinch all the buttons onto one layer. We're then going to create a new layer. I'm going to go to our colors, and we're going to use this orange here in the middle of this column of the sort of warmer tones over here on the right hand side. So the middle color here. And then we're going to reduce our brush size right down to about 2 or 1%. And just draw in a nose. So for this we're just going to draw in a little triangle like so, and then round that off on the right hand side. And then I'm just going to go in and manually fill that in so I can be in control of sort of the fluffy edge and how much sort of the colour is nice and dense in the middle. So then I've got my nose of my snowman. I can then go ahead and go to my layers when you're happy, tap on it and alpha lock it. And let's add some colours and shading onto this as well. So let's go to our colours. Let's select this dark tone on the right of the one we were just using. So this one here. And then we're going to just darken up the underside of the nose. Just very lightly, and a little bit towards the base as well. Just like so. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to switch it out to this warmer yellowy tone at the top of this column. And then we're just going to add in some nice yellow tones on the top of the nose. Working outside and bringing that colour into the nose. Like that. And you should end up with some nice tones sort of blending into one another as we add that yellow in. And then if we zoom out, we've now got the nose ready to go. And now with all of these, we just need to add in some corresponding shadows. So what we can do is, we're going to go ahead and create a new layer. I'm going to drag it underneath the buttons and the nose. I'm going to switch it out to our shadow colour at the top of that column of shadows, so the 4th colour along on that top row. And then on the right hand side of each button, just very lightly, just adding in a little light shadow on the right hand side of each one. And so we can just reflect that it is on the body and it is casting a shadow based on the lighting that it's in, like so. And then with the nose, all we want to do is just a little bit around the base, and then very lightly just sort of push it out to the right. And that's all we want to do, otherwise you'll end up potentially giving it a little mustache, I've noticed in the ones that I was practicing with. And if we zoom out, now the only things we need to do before we move on to the sort of background scene is we're going to go up to our layers. We're going to go right to the very top first of all and create a new layer. We're going to go to our colours, and we're going to grab this dark colour again on the right hand side of our warm tones. So this colour here in the second to last column. We're going to go up to our brush library, And we're going to go to calligraphy for this one, and we're going to go down and we're going to use the brush pen. And the brush size is set to roughly around about 15%. Now with this brush, you can be nice and light with it and it will be quite small and sort of thin. So what we want to do is we want to create the arm here. So coming roughly from about this sort of point here, I'm going to create an arm that makes its way out. So you can go all the way out like so. And then you can draw in the sort of other fingers off of that line like so. And then you have one arm done. And at any point here you can grab your cursor, you can rotate it. If you don't like the angle of it, you can shorten it, make it longer. I would potentially just make mine a tiny bit smaller, and then I'm happy with that positioning. Now the only thing I would do is potentially grab my eraser, and under calligraphy with the monoline brush, I will just cut the edge off. So just round that edge off, making it nice and flat, like so. Now we're going to add some snow onto this arm as well. So we're going to go up to our layers. We're going to tap on that layer and we're going to alpha lock it. We're going to go up to our colors and we're going to double tap in the top left hand corner to select white. We're going to go to our brush library. We're going to switch back to our charcoals down here and back to the 6B compressed. And then we're going to increase our brush size back up to about 5 or 7%, something around there. And then just towards the top edge, very lightly, just run over each line, but towards the top edge of it, and then just adding in these nice little white specks. Now we don't want to fill the whole thing in. All we want to do is just sort of give the impression that there's some snow that's rested on top of the arm there. That's all we want to do. And that's looking pretty good to me. Now what we'll do is we'll grab that layer, and we're going to swipe it to the left and duplicate it. We're then going to grab that layer and we're going to drag it underneath the body until we get all the way down to the bottom. You can put it right at the very bottom if you like of all your layers. Grab your cursor, flip it horizontally, and then move it all the way across to the left hand side, and then you should see your other arm poke out the other side, and you can lower that size down with the uniform option just for perspective purposes, and then just pop it there in behind, and then we've got two arms for one there. The only thing we need to do is reflect this arm onto the body slightly, so we're going to go to our layers again. We're going to go back to the middle ball of our snowman, turn it on and off just to be sure. We're going to switch our colour out to the middle shadow tone here, the fourth column along the bottom, the middle colour. And then all we're going to do is just slightly darken up around the base and then just push that out to the right hand side. So just a tiny little bit around that base and then push it out to the right hand side there. And that would just make it look like it's actually part of the body. If you wanted to, you could also zoom in, change your colour out to white, so double tapping in the top left hand corner. You could reduce your brush size all the way down to about 2 or 1% and then just lighten up this left hand edge, which will make it look like we've created sort of a gap in the snow of the body to poke that stick into. And then that will give you a nice sort of realistic sort of look to that. So now we've done our snowman. It's up to you if you want to leave it as it is, but we're going to put it into a lovely little scene in the woods. So we're going to go ahead and add that scene in. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we can group all of our snowman layers together. So we're going to swipe from left to right on every single layer. We're going to go up to this option here at the top and group it together, and then compress that group down. Now at this point, if you're potentially going to run out of layers as we get through this, you could tap on this layer and flatten it into one layer. I'm not going to do it because I don't need to, but if you run out of layers, this is an option later on as we go through this. Let's create a new layer and drag it underneath our group. We are going to increase our brush size up to roughly around about something nice and big. So something roughly around about say 30-40%. And we're going to go ahead and go to our colors and make sure you're using white in the top left hand corner. Now all we're going to do is just add in a very light wash across the floor, but we kind of want to, if I just very quickly draw it in, we kind of want to create this sort of space here. Now we're going to do it very lightly, but that's kind of the space you want to leave. You want to let it run out nice and faint on the corners, but we want to create that horizontal line for our sort of landscape. So coming across here like so, and then just bringing that down and getting really narrow towards the bottom here. This is just to add a nice little soft wash to the ground underneath, and we can add in the rest of our scene on top. So that's then in position. Let's go to our layers. Let's create another new layer. We're going to go up to our colors. We're going to use that nice yellow tone in the second column, the top color, and in the top left hand corner we're going to increase our brush size to about 65%, just so we can fill out a lot of space in one go. And we're just going to very lightly brush over this left-hand edge, fading it out as it gets towards the right. And that's all we're doing that for, is just to add in a nice little bit of colour right in the very background of our scene, but we're going to layer stuff on top of it. So now we've got our background washes in there. Let's go ahead and try and pull off the effect that this snowball down here at the bottom has been rolled into position from the right hand side of the scene here. So we're going to go up to our colours. We're going to grab a shadow colour, so the top one in that column of shadows. And then on this right hand side here, we're going to go up to our layers and create a new one. We want to just sort of right underneath the bottom of the snowball, add in a very light shadow, and then we're going to fill out this area here, like so, and fade it right out towards the edge. Just let it blend out nice and lightly, nice and softly, till you create this sort of space here. Now that's not necessarily just a shadow of the snowball. We're going to put some streaks in there just to show that it's been rolled into position. So on that layer, on the same layer, we're going to go up to our colours, we're going to double tap to select white. We're then going to go back to our layers, and this soft wash we did in the background, just go to your layer option by tapping on the layer, going to N and lowering the opacity down to roughly around about 45%. This will help us see our really bright parts of our snow. Go back up to your shadow layer there that we just created for the snowball. And then with our brush, we're just going to push some lines across. Now what we want to do is maybe reduce our brush size down to about 2%. Just push some lines into that space like so, and then you should let a lot of the shadow through at the same time. We're then going to go ahead and on the edge of this just create a nice thick bit of snow where as it's been rolled through it's pushed the snow to the edge. So we're just creating some snow here, really pushing that quite firmly into the screen here just to create those nice white patches until we create something like that. Let's also do the same just in behind as well. So I'm pressing very firmly just on the edge of our little shadow sort of streaky area here. If you want to, we can actually reduce our brush size right down to the smallest size that we can. Press sort of very vertically and draw in some nice streak lines in that area again, just to show sort of the movement and the dragging through that little bit of sort of grass underneath, I presume. So now we've done that in terms of with these nice light parts, we're going to add in lots more of those. So we're going to go back up to about 3% and let's start adding in some nice little bumps of snow. So let's add in a lovely bit of snow here, like so, just creating some nice little rounded patterns. And then going back on myself, just so you can see there, I pressed nice and firm towards the top edge, underneath faded that out, and then just let it run out to the right hand side. We're then going to go ahead and add in a nice little bit here too, just nice bumps in the ground, and then just push it to the right hand side if you want to, like that. So there's a couple of nice little lumps for an example piece. We're going to add some over here towards the background area, and then obviously as they get further back, you don't want them to get bigger than the ones in the front, so just add in some bumps. They also don't need to all be the same shape, they don't need to be flat like this one. They could be quite big and sort of bulky here at the front, and then fade out and add some more back here. And if you want to reduce your brush size down to maybe even smaller, maybe about 1 or 2%, and then you can be more accurate with your sort of scaling as you get back there. And then just a few little spots of white as we get further back, and then maybe where it got rolled into position there might be a nice big lump of white just here. So let's just emphasize that even more by just fluffing out just where the snowball sort of got pushed up to, and then we should be able to pull that little effect off where we've now got the little bit of snow here underneath and got all these little bumps of snowy sort of mounds in the ground, and this ball's been pushed into position there, which also acts as a nice shadow. Now don't forget to just add in some little spots back here as well, just up in behind in the back of our scene. And then let's just add in one more here, just for our snow. Now the cool thing what we can do here is we can create some shadows very quickly for our snow, which will make it look even more 3D. So we're going to go up to our layers, and on that layer we're simply going to swipe it to the left and duplicate it. The bottom one out the two, we're going to tap on that layer and we're going to alpha lock it. We're going to go up to our colors, and let's use this color here at the top of our shadows, so this one here that we've been using. Go back to your layer, tap on that layer and use the option of fill. Now you see your sort of snow start to sort of just have a little bit of an outline to it. Grab your cursor. I'm just going to move that slightly out to the right hand side, which will then nicely sort of give your snow a shadowed side to it. Tap on your cursor when you're done. We're then going to go back up to our layers. We're going to turn off the alpha lock for a moment because we want to adjust it now beyond its shape. We're going to go to our adjustments, motion blur, and from left to right, just push that shadow to the right hand side. And I've gone up to 30% there at the top. Now that will nicely soften out your shadow and push it to the right hand side, giving it a nice slowly casted shadow across that ground there. And you can grab your cursor if you want to, maybe move it slightly down so you get the underside of the snow, and move it even further to the right if you like. And then if we tap on our cursor, if it's too strong for you, you can go to your layer and just simply lower the opacity down. I'm going to leave mine quite strong, about 85%, and then that gives a lovely 3D look to our snow. Now the snow that we created in the background there, we can now increase that back up to a higher percentage. So we go to our layers, the snow sort of wash that we added in, go to the N, increase that back up until you can still work out what it is you've added. So something about 85% looks pretty good to me. We get a good idea that there's lots of sort of snow on the ground, but we've also got some lovely textures in there. So now let's work on the trees in the background. Now these will be nice and easy to do. You don't need to worry about drawing trees too intensely. All we're going to do is go to our layers. Above all of our ground layers, if you want to, you could swipe on all 4 of those, group them together, and then collapse that group down as well. We're going to create a new layer. I'm going to go to our shadow colors. We're going to go to this one here in the middle of our shadows. And what we're going to do is we're going to want to increase our brush size. So let's go for something roughly, say, let's go for even bigger than that. Let's go for something about 15%. And all we're going to want to do for this is we're going to just start roughly here. So this is our horizon line roughly here. We don't really want to come any lower than that. And all we're going to do is push that all the way up to the top and then thicken it out a little bit more, filling in the inside of that even more. Just making sure we've got a nice strong trunk there. So all we're doing there is making that thin out towards the top, and then create a branch running out like so. And then you could reduce your brush size just to give some varying sizes, and about 7% mine is, create another one just here too. Now all we're going to do then is repeat that on the other side. So back up to about 15%. Let's create another tree. So roughly sort of symmetrical across in terms of its gap. So just making sure we just make the scene somewhat nice and symmetrical. You can make this one nice and chunky if you want to, maybe round it out towards the bottom a bit more, but just to make sure our sort of scene is symmetrical. And then just create a branch running off of that as well. And you don't have to necessarily create 2, but I'm going to reduce the brush size back down to about 7% and just run one out, a very small one towards the top, so that they are slightly different to one another. We're then going to go ahead and on that layer, we're going to tap on it and we're going to alpha lock it. Now please don't spend too much time on this because we are going to blur out all the details in the background here. It really does need to be sort of a rough element that we're going to put in the background. We're going to go up to our colors. We're going to grab the yellow that we've been using for our sunlight in the second column, the top color. And because this layer is now alpha locked, we're going to just very quickly brighten up that left hand side. So I'm going to go back up to about 15% and I'm going to run that all the way up on the left hand side of that branch, a little bit on this side of the branch, and that is literally all you need to do. Do the same on this side, go down this left hand edge on the trunk and then just fill that out on this side as well, and then maybe a smidge in there, and then that's all that needs to be. That is enough texture, maybe even just a light streak or 2 in there, but we're going to blur the whole thing out. So now while we're on this layer, we're going to add some snow. So we're going to switch our color out to white by double tapping in the top left hand corner. Reduce your brush size down to about 8 or 9%. Then we're going to go back to the layer. We're going to turn off the alpha lock. We're going to do a couple of things. We're going to add in some snow around the base of the tree. So fluffing that out and pushing it out either side. So then we've got some snow there. Let's add some snow to the base of this tree as well. Really fluffing that out. Nice circular motion. Like so. Lovely little bit of snow there. And then grab your colors and go to your shadow color. Now for this one we're going to probably use, let's use this middle tone again. And all we're going to do is just push out a shadow from that tree. So push it from left to right. And then we've got a nice shadow from that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to our layers. We're going to swipe on it to the left hand side and duplicate it. Then the bottom one out the 2, we're going to grab our cursor. and scale it down in size and just move it into the back of the scene a little bit more. So we're going to move it to say here, where this one's now showing on the inside there, but this one's not. So we're going to grab our selection tool and then very quickly grab your rectangle, grab that layer here with a nice little selection, and then grab your cursor and move that across into this scene here. Now again, don't worry about the fact that that shadow is not running out. If you want to, you can grab your brush again and just continue to push that shadow out to the right hand side. Now we're currently creating a nice little forest look, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go to our layers, we're going to pinch both of those two together so it's on one layer. We're going to go to our adjustments and gauge and blur, and we're going to swipe from left to right until we get a nice soft glow in there. And that's what I meant about not adding too much in there in terms of details, because we've got to blur it all out and you get the impression that it's a nice lit up tree from that left hand side. And then I'm going to go for something roughly around about 6%. That looks pretty good to me. Let's then tap on our adjustments, and then to flush out the back of the scene even more, we're going to go up to our layers. We're going to swipe on that layer to the left hand side and duplicate it. We're going to grab the bottom one, we're going to grab our cursor, and we're going to cheat. We're going to grab our little node here in the top right hand corner with the uniform option selected, move it up into the back of the scene there, like so. And then we're going to grab our cursor again and turn that off. And then we're going to grab the adjustments, gauge and blur again, blur out even more because it's gone even further back. It's about 14% there, nice strong blur. Tap on your adjustments and then grab your layer, and then we're going to go to the top layer again, swipe that to the left and duplicate it one more time. And then the bottom one, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to move it to the right. So we're going to grab our cursor, scale it down, move it over to the right hand side of our scene there, something like that. And then when you're happy, make sure it touches the top edge though. Tap on your cursor, go to your adjustments, gauge and blur, and again blur that out right in the back of the scene. About 14% looks pretty good. And then tap on your adjustments when you're done. And now we've created sort of a big forest in the background with our little snowman sat here, and we've got a lovely blurred out sort of depth perspective, because we're going to use that now to create some snow that's going to sit in front. Now for this, we're going to go ahead and go back to our layers. Right at the very top, we're going to create a new layer. We're going to go to our colors, and we're going to double tap in the top left hand corner to select white. Now you're going to need to download the brush in the description down below as mentioned in the intro, and we're going to use this stipple collection. Now I'm going to use the light one, and I'm going to make sure my brush size is nice and large to start with. Let's go a bit smaller actually, let's go for about 70% with the light brush there, and we're going to tap away, creating some snow. It's up to you how low you want to go there, but just tapping away in our scene, creating some snow. And then you can vary the sizes if you want to, maybe drop it down to about 40%, get some smaller flakes in there, and then just tapping away, really create a really filled out fluffy snow scene. Now we do want to leave some gaps though, because what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and leave that layer as it is for a moment, because now what we're going to do is we're going to go to our adjustments, gauge and blur, and we're going to swipe from left to right. I'm going to blur that out. Now that's going to create some very soft looking snowflakes, and I'm going to use about 4% blur on that. So these ones are sort of out of focus, and then when we tap on our adjustments, we're going to repeat the entire process. So we're going to go back to our layers, we're going to create a new layer, and then with this brush we're going to just tap away and create some in focus specks of snow, and we can increase it all the way up to 100% if we want to, create some nice big flakes of snow. And every time we tap, we're just adding a little bit more depth to this effect, making sure that the ones in the background there are nice and soft, and we've got a lovely little snow scene. We can decrease the brush size if we want to say 30% or 32, create some in focus smaller ones, and just tapping away, flushing out that scene with some lovely details, like so. Keep tapping away, and you should have a lovely depth effect starting to come to life a lot more. And then once we've added enough of it, you should get that effect. We're then going to do one little change where we're going to go back to our layers. We're going to take a look at our background layer, that with the wash of snow that we added down here. I'm going to go to that layer in the group that I created, the very bottom layer it should be for you. Now it's currently at 85%. I think it could go up to the maximum again. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab my brush. I'm going to switch it back to the charcoal brush, the 6B that we've been using. Now we've got the rest of our scene. I'm going to go back to my layers. I'm going to create a new layer. We can drag it underneath the one that we're just working on. So it's the very bottom layer now. And I'm just going to very lightly just add in some more white area in the background here in the non-shadowed areas. So just very lightly adding in some more white in the background there. And then just keep going, adding in that little snow falling in the background. And then that should just start to fill out the ground a bit more. And if it's a little bit too sharp with its details, you could always blur it. So once I've added enough here, which looks pretty good to me, I'm going to go to my adjustments. I'm going to go to Gaussian blur, and let's swipe from left to right, just adding in another 4% blur because that's what we used for the trees. Tap on your adjustments, and then we should have added a lot more snow scene. If you want to, you could add a bigger wash down here and move the snow closer to the edge, but in terms of an illustration, I really like that look. One little touch I want to add before we finish is just an extra little bit of snow in front of the snowman down here. So let's go to our layers. I'm going to go right to the top and create a new layer. And with my 6B brush still selected, I'm going to just add some snow in front of the snowball, just to sort of blend it into the scene a tiny bit more. That way it looks like it sits in behind a little mound of snow there. And if you want to, you could switch out your layer, so grab a new layer and drag it underneath that snow. Grab your shadow color, the top color on that fourth column, and just darken up in behind there, just where it lands onto the snowball. And if we pinch with 2 fingers and we go full screen with 4, we end up with today's finished design. So if you enjoyed today's tutorial, if you can drop a like down below, helps the channel out an awful lot. And if you're new here, I post Procreate content every single week. So if you'd like some tutorials to follow along with, hit that subscribe button down below. And shout out to all my patrons. If you'd like to get even more Joel.create content, there's a link down below to my Patreon where you can get access to even more tutorials every single month, as well as sneak peeks, extra benefits on my Discord, and merch. And if you're interested in any of the equipment I'm using, the Paperlike screen cover, the Sketchboard Pro, and the Pen Tips glove and grip, there's a link in the description to all of my equipment. And with all that said, I'll see you in the next one.